You know, sometimes the friend who holds you back doesn't come dressed as your enemy. They don't need to shout or point a finger in your face. They simply smile and tell you to stay right where you are because it feels safe. This is the friend I call the comfort zone keeper. They care about you, but their caring is laced with fear. Fear that if you change, you might leave them behind. So they plant subtle messages in your mind, things that sound gentle and reassuring, but really, in the end, leave to the foe your message of guilt. So, with this in mind, things that sound gentle and reassuring, they'll say, why risk it when you're already doing okay? Or, don't be so hard on yourself. Just relax, you've earned it. And on the surface, those words feel like love. They feel like support. But underneath, they're a quiet invitation to stop growing. You see, comfort is seductive. It doesn't feel dangerous, but it is. It lulls you into believing that where you are now is the furthest you'll ever go. It convinces you that dreams are for other people, the brave ones, the lucky ones, the ones who don't have responsibilities or fears. And so you stay still, hoping the right moment will show up on your doorstep. You keep telling yourself you'll start next week, or next year, or when life finally feels less complicated. But here's the truth. Life never simplifies itself for anyone. You have to decide whether you want the approval of the person who keeps you in the familiar or the freedom that comes when you finally step beyond it. This kind of friend doesn't always know they're holding you back. Maybe they watch someone else fail, and now they're terrified you'll face the same disappointment. Maybe they don't believe they're capable of more, so they can't imagine you are either. And if you're not careful, their doubts start to sound like wisdom. You start to believe the lie that wanting more makes you ungrateful. You begin to feel guilty for outgrowing the stories you were raised in. But hear this, there is no shame in evolving. You were created to grow, to stretch, to reach for something bigger than you can see. A friend who truly loves you will celebrate the moments you dare to transform, even when it scares them. They'll stand beside you when you fail and remind you to get back up. They won't keep you trapped in the same small corner of your life just because it's easier for them to understand. So be honest about who you allow to influence your choices. Ask yourself whether their voice calls you higher or keeps you tethered to the same place you've always been. Because if you never challenge the comfort zone keeper, you will wake up one day wondering how many of your dreams died quietly while you were busy staying safe. There's a certain kind of friend who wears the mask of concern, but underneath it, they're quietly whittling down the edges of your vision. I call them the vision shrinker. They don't come right out and tell you you'll never make it. That would be too obvious. Instead, they cloak their doubt in soft warnings. They say things like, "Are you sure that's realistic?" Or, "Don't get your hopes up too high." And little by little, those words begin to erode your faith in what you felt so certain about. It's not always malice that drives them. Sometimes it's their own unhealed disappointment. Maybe they once had big dreams that collapsed, so now they see every ambition through the lens of their own failure. They believe it's kinder to protect you from that same heartbreak. But what they don't realize is that their fear doesn't have to become your destiny. Just because they never tasted the fullness of their potential doesn't mean you won't. You'll notice the vision shrinker whenever you start speaking life over your goals. The moment you say you're going to write that book, start that business, heal that relationship, or walk into your purpose, they get uncomfortable. They'll tell you to be careful so you don't look foolish. They'll remind you of every obstacle standing in your way. And if you're not anchored in conviction, you'll start shrinking your dream to to fit the size of their comfort. The truth is, most people are more committed to staying familiar than stepping into the unknown. They'll call it being realistic, but sometimes realism is just fear in disguise. There's a reason Scripture says that without vision, people perish. When you surrender your vision to someone else's limitations, a part of your spirit begins to wither. You stop expecting more from yourself and from life. You settle for the path of least resistance because at least no one will criticize you for trying. A vision shrinker will often sound logical, and that's why they're dangerous. Logic has its place, but purpose is rarely logical. Purpose requires faith, the willingness to walk even when you can't see the finish line. It demands that you honor the dream placed in your heart, not the fears planted in your mind. If you've ever wondered why your confidence wavers, look closely at who you share your dreams with. Are they fanning the flames or pouring water over them? This is being lit. The truth demands that you face it before you can ignore it. The truth demands that you honor the dream placed in your heart, not the fanning the flames or pouring water over them. Do they light up when you talk about what sets your soul on fire, or do they look for ways to extinguish that spark? You don't have to resent them, but you do have to protect your vision. Because when you stand before the mirror years from now, it won't be their doubts you regret. It will be the moments you believed them. There's a certain kind of friend who feels like a mystery you can't quite solve. They're always around, always nodding along when you talk about your plans, but something in their eyes doesn't match their words. I call them the silent competitor. They don't openly challenge you because that would reveal too much. Instead, they quietly measure your progress against their own. Like every success you experience somehow steals from their worth. You can feel it in the pauses that follow your good news. When you share that you finally got the promotion or that your project is taking off, they smile, but there's a flicker of something else, a discomfort, an unease they can't fully hide. They might even say all the right things, "I'm so happy for you," or "you deserve it," but their energy doesn't lie. You walk away wondering why you feel guilty for doing well. The silent competitor operates from a place of lack. Deep down, they believe there isn't enough abundance to go around, that if you win, they must be losing. They can't celebrate your progress wholeheartedly because it magnifies the parts of themselves they haven't nurtured. It's not that they hate you, it's that your growth reminds them of their own inertia. Over time, if you're not careful, this dynamic chips away at your spirit. You start downplaying your victories to keep the peace. You shrink your joy to make sure no one feels threatened. You begin to carry the weight of their unspoken envy like it's your responsibility. But it's not. You are not here to make yourself smaller so others can feel more comfortable in their unfulfilled potential. You'll recognize this pattern when you realize you're censoring your own light. When you're around a silent competitor, you might notice that you hesitate before speaking up about what you're building. You might feel like you're walking on eggshells, trying to avoid the invisible line between support and resentment. But you don't owe anyone an apology for becoming who you were meant to be. A true friend will be inspired by your progress, not intimidated by it. They'll see your success as proof that more is possible, that blessings aren't finite. They'll cheer you on because they understand that celebrating you doesn't diminish their own path. So take a moment and think about the people who surround you. Are they lifting you higher or silently hoping you'll stumble so they can feel better by comparison? It's not cruel to be honest about the energy you're inviting into your life. It's necessary, because the cost of keeping a silent competitor close is too high. It's the slow erosion of your confidence, the subtle theft of your joy, and you deserve to live unburdened by someone else's hidden rivalry. Some people don't set out to drain you, but that doesn't make the effect any less real. The emotional sponge is the friend who shows up carrying the weight of every crisis, every disappointment, every slight, and they expect you to hold it all for them. At first, you tell yourself you're just being a good friend. You listen patiently, you offer advice, you sacrifice your own peace so they can feel seen. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start to realize these conversations never really change. The stories are always the same, just told with fresh details and new villains. You try to be understanding because you know everyone struggles. You convince yourself that if you just give a little more time, more compassion, more of your own energy, they'll finally feel better. But the emotional sponge doesn't want resolution as much as they want attention. The drama becomes their identity. They're more comfortable in crisis than in healing, and without meaning to, they pull you into that pattern with them. Before long, you notice you're exhausted after every encounter. You hang up the phone feeling like you've just run a marathon you never signed up for. You start to dread their messages because you already know what's coming. Another list of grievances, another plea for reassurance, another moment where you put your own needs on hold. And the longer you allow it, the more you teach them that your boundaries are negotiable. What makes this so tricky is that empathy is a beautiful thing. It's one of the most powerful forces in any friendship. But empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. The boundaries without boundaries don't make boundaries. Self-betrayal. When you constantly absorb another person's turmoil, you lose sight of your own well-being. You start believing you don't have the right to protect your energy because someone else has it worse. You forget that you are allowed to say, "I care about you, but I can't carry this for you." If you look closely, you'll see that the emotional sponge rarely asks how you're doing in return. Even if they do, it's only a brief pause before the conversation turns back to their problems. It's not that they're inherently bad people. They're just so consumed by their own struggles that they can't hold space for yours. And over time, that imbalance can leave you feeling unseen and unappreciated. You deserve friendships that feel mutual, where support flows both ways. You deserve connections that nourish you instead of depleting you. It doesn't make you heartless to step back. It makes you wise. Because when you stop letting the emotional sponge soak up all your strength, you create room for relationships built on respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. There's a certain kind of friend who doesn't confront you openly, who doesn't argue face to face, but whose words still find a way to wound you. This is the passive aggressor, the person who disguises criticism as humor, who hides resentment behind a polite smile. You'll know them by the way their compliments feel strangely hollow, like there's something sharp tucked inside. They'll say, "Wow, must be nice to have all that free time," when you finally achieve something you worked for. Or, "I guess not everyone cares about staying humble," when you share your excitement about a new milestone. At first, you'll try to brush it off. You'll tell yourself you're being too sensitive. You'll replay the conversation in your head, trying to figure out if you imagined it. But deep down, you can feel the intention behind their words. It's a subtle form of sabotage, one that chips away at your confidence little by little until you start questioning whether you have the right to feel proud of yourself at all. The passive aggressor rarely takes responsibility for how they make you feel. If you try to call it out, they'll act surprised. They'll say, "I was just joking," or "You're reading too much into it." And after enough of these exchanges, you start to wonder if they're right. You start to second-guess your own instincts. That's what makes this so dangerous. It doesn't look like outright hostility. It looks like a friend making harmless remarks. But the impact is anything but harmless. Over time, the passive aggressor's comments become a constant hum in the back of your mind. You think twice before sharing your goals because you don't want to invite another jab. You downplay your accomplishments so you won't have to defend them. So you don't understand you had the power to do it. You have the power to do so much more. You have the power to invite another jab. You downplay your accomplishments so you won't have to defend them. So you don't understand you have the power to do so much more. You have the power to defend yourself. You have the power to recover. You have the power to release yourself. You have the power to end the argument. You shrink yourself just enough to avoid being the target of their veiled criticisms. And in doing so, you abandon parts of yourself you once held with pride. You deserve friendships that feel safe, where you don't have to brace yourself for subtle attacks. You deserve to be around people who can be happy for you without needing to tear you down in the same breath. A friend who respects you won't use humor as a weapon. Friend who respects you won't use humor as a weapon. They won't wrap judgment in pretty words and expect you to pretend it doesn't hurt. Pay attention to the patterns. If someone's praise always leaves you feeling smaller instead of seen, that's not love. It's insecurity masquerading as support. And no matter how long you've known them, you have the right to protect your spirit from that, because you don't have to keep proving your worth to someone who's determined to undermine it. There's a friend who feels safe to be around because they never challenge you. They never push you to do more or be more. They never question your excuses or call you out when you're drifting away from your purpose. I call them the enabler of mediocrity. They're the ones who nod along when you talk about your plans, but never hold you accountable when you abandon them. They're quick to reassure you that it's okay to stay comfortable, to settle for whatever feels easiest in the moment. It doesn't always come from a place of ill will. Sometimes it comes from their own fear of change. If you grow, if you rise, if you reach for something higher, it forces them to look at the ways they've been playing small in their own life. And rather than face that discomfort, they'd rather keep you right there beside them, where nothing ever has to shift. They'll say things like, "You've already done so much. Why push yourself?" Or "You deserve a break." Even when you know in your heart that what you're really doing is hiding from your calling. And the more you hear those words, the easier it becomes to believe them. You start to confuse temporary comfort with lasting peace. You start to think that settling is just part of being an adult, that wanting more is selfish or naive. But the truth is, you were never meant to live your life in neutral. There is something inside you that was built to expand, to create, to impact the world around you in a way only you can. When you spend your days surrounded by people who celebrate your stagnation, you forget how much you're capable of. You start to internalize the idea that good enough is all you'll ever have the strength to pursue. The enabler of mediocrity will always tell you what you want to hear, not what you need to hear. You must pursue the ultimate of what you can be. You must pursue the ultimate of what you can be. When you spend your days surrounded by people who celebrate your stagnation, you must pursue the ultimate of what you can be. You must pursue the ultimate of what you can be. You must pursue the ultimate of. They'll soothe your doubts without ever challenging them. They'll agree with your reasons for quitting before you even finish explaining them. And while their support feels comforting in the moment, it's a slow poison to your potential. Because every time you choose their approval over your own growth, you trade a piece of your purpose for the illusion of acceptance. A real friend will love you enough to tell you the truth. They'll remind you of the dreams you spoke about when your heart was still on fire. They won't let you settle into patterns that drain your spirit just because it's easier than stepping into the unknown. They'll stand beside you, not as an accomplice to your excuses, but as an ally to your greatness. So take an honest look at who you let speak into your life. Ask yourself if their encouragement builds you up or keeps you comfortably average. Because in the end, you have to decide whether you're willing to disappoint the enabler of mediocrity or disappoint yourself.